Well, tonight we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 6. 1 Samuel chapter 6. You know, I offered to let Matt, who, by the way, I'm so thankful that he taught for me last week, allowed me to go see my family and my wife's family, but they're my family, and really enjoyed that, and so I'm thankful for the blessing to be able to see them. But, you know, I offered him, I said, look, Matt, I will send you my notes for 1 Samuel. I will send you my commentary for 1 Samuel. Buddy, you are welcome to do it. He said, no, I think I'm going to do it with Hosea. I said, okay, all right, that's fine. You've been working on it, that's fine. So I figured it's an Old Testament book and maybe one you guys haven't got to do before, so it'll be a blessing. But we are going to continue down our study of 1 Samuel. We left off, if you've not been with us, and I think we have a few maybe that haven't normally sat in here with us, we left off with a real quick recap. Chapter 1, there's a woman named Hannah who is maligned by her sister wife, I guess we would call that. It's her husband's other wife who has lots and lots of kids, and she's maligned because she has no kids, and none of them love God except for the priest who's supposed to be watching out for all the people, but lets his sons run amok, and there is carousing, and there is drinking, and there is all these things going on when they're supposed to be worshiping God. And there's one lady in there who's not doing all of that, and she's praying to God, moving her lips without saying any words. And the guy who thinks that he's supposed to be watching out for everybody spots her and tells her she needs to stop being drunk. She gets upset. That's Hannah. She says, I'm not drunk. I'm praying, and God is hearing my prayers. He honors that, says, you're going to have a son. She has Samuel. Samuel is the last of the judges and a prophet. He's not a priest because he's not a high priest or anything like that. The priests are Eli's sons, and Eli, who's the priest, and his sons have abandoned being faithful to God, especially his sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Now, last time we got together, Hophni and Phinehas finally bit the dust. Samuel has been committed to God. He's living at the temple, it's not the temple, but he's living at a temple with Eli, and Eli has been raising him. Well, Hophni and Phinehas die on the field of battle. The Ark of the Covenant, God's Ark, the covenant of the presence of the Lord, is taken by the Philistines, and Eli, at hearing the word, falls over, and he is a very large, overweight old man, breaks his neck, and dies. And that's where we end up. So, the Ark of the Covenant of the house of the Lord has been taken. Hey, Naomi and the baby. They're walking in the back, taking laps. So the Ark of the Covenant of the presence of the Lord is now taken by the Philistines, and the Philistines have moved it inside of kind of their territory in order to keep it safe. And they've put it right in front of one of their deities to kind of rest and live there. And it's a little bit like the deity statue is standing there, and they put the ark kind of in a position of stand before our God, right? That's the thing that happens. So I want you to listen for what happens to their God in the presence of the Ark of the Covenant twice, and then what their response to that is, okay? So we're going to read chapter 6, verse 1, and this is chapter 5. Let's go back and start with chapter 5. Chapter 5, verse 1, and we're going to go all the way through the beginning of chapter 6, verse 9. When the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod, which is within Philistine. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But when they rose early the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon our God. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, "What shall we do with the ark of God of Israel?" And they answered, "Let the ark of God be brought around to Gath." So they brought the ark of God, the God to Israel, the ark of the God of Israel there. But after they had brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic. And he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. But as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, "They have brought around us the ark of God of Israel to kill us and our people." So they sent therefore and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, "Send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us and our people." For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. The ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us what we shall do and send it to its place." They said, "If you send away the ark of God of Israel, do not send it empty, but by all means return him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you that the guilt offering that we shall offer And they said, why his hand does not turn away from you?" And they said, "What is the guilt offering that we shall return to him?" They answered, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice or rats, according to the number of lords of the Philistines. For the same plague was on all of you and on your lords. So you must make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the land, and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from off you and your gods and your land. Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened theirs? After he had dealt severely with them, did they not send the people away, and they departed? Now then, take and prepare a new cart and 2 milk cows on which there was never come a yoke, and yoke the cows to the cart. But take their calves home away from them, and take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart, and put it in a box, and on its side figures of gold, which you are returning to him as a guilt offering. Then send it off and let it go on its way, and watch. If it goes up the way to its own land, to Beth Shemesh, then it is he who has done us this great harm. But if not, then we shall know that it is not his hand that struck us. It happened to us by coincidence. All right, we're going to stop there. This is kind of a crazy story, right? Does this sound a little crazy? Anybody else? I'm going to tell you, this is a crazy story. So they've taken the Ark of the Covenant. They've placed it before Dagon, their god, in Ashdod, which is kind of their capital city there. And inside of that, there has been a major issue of their God falling on his face. He's fallen on his face, and they set him back. He's now, all right, so what's like one step further than having to bend on your knee before someone? If you're going before another, like a king or a ruling authority, right? I'm going to get on my knee, but you're going to lay down on your face, right? That's like the only thing you can do further. So they put the ark on its side, on the ground, and they come back, and it's literally face down. The statue's face down on the ground. So they come back, and they set it up, and they walk out, and they go back again. And next time, not only is it face down on the ground, but it's face down, its head has rolled off, and its hands are removed. And there's just this amazing concept that comes to play out there in that place. So we're going to follow these through. You got blanks there. We're going to fill these blanks out. We're going to try to make sure that we give you all the answers. If I don't give you all the answers, you can come look at my notes afterwards and fill those in. First, God deals strictly with false gods. God deals strictly with false gods. Here we see in verses 1 through 5, the Lord cuts down false gods without the help of faithless followers. Without the help of faithless followers. You remember, why did they bring out the Ark of the Covenant to begin with? Anybody remember? Why did they bring the Ark of the Covenant out? Well, why did they take it to the field of battle to begin with? That's right. Lucky Rabbit's foot. Right? They were going to command God by taking this ark to the battlefield, and they would win. Why did they take the ark, though? What had happened beforehand in the battles? Yeah, they lost 4,000 men, and then 35,000 men after that? Lots and lots and lots of people, lots of death. They lost battles. So they take the ark with them in order that they might win a battle this time, and instead Hophni and Phinehas die, the ark is captured, and they go back to Ashdod. So they've already been defeated, but as soon as the ark is out of the hands of God's faithless people, what happens? He throws down the other god without needing a person. And this is why I make that first point. The Lord cuts down false gods without the help of faithless followers. He does not, we can't barter with him. We have nothing to barter with. We can't go, God, if you'll do this thing for me, then I'll do this for you because I know you need me to do it. No. He throws down false gods with the very presence of himself without people. Second thing, the Lord cuts down false gods' followers and presses them into submission to the true God. The Lord cuts down false gods' followers and presses them into submission to the true God. All right, why am I making this point? How can I say this is true, right? Because that's true not just for them, but also for us now. If you start dealing with people who are really under the judgment hand of God, there is something in them that realizes, oh my word, I cry out to heaven. People who are dying on their deathbed, that have cursed God all of their lives, what happens sometimes to them? Right there on that deathbed. They change their mind. Something comes over them, and they feel regret for their entire life, and there's a natural response in man under the pressing guilt of God to cry out to him. Here's how it plays out in this story. So they take the false god, they place him before the false god, his hands are cut off, all those things happen, right? The Holy Spirit wins its battle without man needing to raise a hand. But secondly, the followers start to suffer everywhere this ark goes. It goes into a town, goes to 5 different towns with 5 different lords, and every time it goes to the town, there are tumors and rats everywhere that follow with it. Tumors and rats, tumors and rats. Where else were there tumors and mice or rats? It's happened before. Think about it hard. Where did plagues happen against people? Egypt. Now, do you guys remember where we said the Philistines' country began? We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Where does the Philistine territory begin? Remember, they were a seafaring people that came over and dominated the coast, and they came all the way down to Egypt. So do you think they had some run-ins with the Egyptians? Do you think after 400 years of having slaves there, the Egyptians had a tie to the Hebrews still? Absolutely. So when the Hebrews left, we're not very far away from that, right? We're only talking about, a few hundred years. They got stories still left over afterwards. They know what happened in Egypt. They know there were plagues, they know there was death, and they know that once the people of God left Egypt, Egypt was fine. There was no more judgment on them after that. So these stories are rattling around in their heads, and all they know is, there was rats in Egypt. There were tumors, boils. Remember tumors and boils is one of the plagues that's there? So they know where this is coming from. They say, we don't want that ark. You're trying to give us this ark so you could kill us, because they're Philistines, they're nasty people, and they're betraying people all the time. So God is cutting down the false god's followers by sending this ark to them. But he's not just cutting them down. There's a response. They have a response to God. What's the response to God at the end of this thing? How do they respond to him? Okay, so they decide they're going to make a guilt offering, right? But there's something that happens before that guilt offering. There's a turning point. Did you catch it in some of the language that was there? Look at verse 12 of chapter 5. What happens to that place? There in verse 12. What do they look up and do? They look up and they cry to heaven. Now, why would you look up and cry to heaven? Where's their God? Their God's in that room, right? Well, he's laying on the ground, right? But their God's in that room. So if they were crying to their God, they would go to that room and cry to that God and make sacrifices to him. But they don't. where do they go to? They cry out to the Israelites' God, where they cry out to the heavens. When God truly starts cutting down false gods in people's lives, where do they cry at the end of the day? To heaven. They cry out to God. Because in some sense, there is a general knowledge of a creator ingrained within us. And God will strike down and deal harshly with false gods to gain the attention and affection of people. He does that. I'm thankful he does that. So God deals strictly with false gods. Second thing, though, and this really deals with chapter 6, 1 through 9, that second part we read there. God deals strictly with active violators of his holiness. Active violators of his holiness. The Philistines decided to send the ark back so that they might be healed. The Philistines decided to send the ark back so that they might be healed. They figure this thing out, that by looking at the Egyptians and what the Egyptians did, this is what we need to do. We need to ship this ark back to them. Secondly, though, the Philistines decided to give the ark back with sacrifices because they feared the Lord's affliction. They decided to give the ark back with sacrifices because they feared the Lord's affliction. And this gets to what you mentioned a minute ago, Chris. They recognized the need for a guilt offering. This is what, or where does it break down? All right, anybody been reading Leviticus with our daily Bible reading plan? Nobody's been reading the daily Bible reading plan? I see some of you in here that stream yourself reading it. Please give me some acknowledgement. Thank you. Okay. Do you remember in here seeing anywhere that you're supposed to make golden tumors and golden rats to offer back to God? That's not in there, is it? Do they have Leviticus by this point? Sure, Leviticus comes before this, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. And this comes later. So are they giving a guilt offering because Moses' law has told them to? No. Are they giving a guilt offering because their God told them to? No. They're giving a guilt offering because they know they've wronged the God of the universe. And there is something innately in them that says, this is what you're supposed to do. And I do think there's something in us in creation that realizes a strict punishment for actively sinning against God, and we feel like we should offer something up, don't we? But is our natural bent, like in a movie, to plead with God for the return of something, and then he does it, and then we forget conveniently our plea? Do you think that really tricks God? Right? We've done that. Oh, God, if you'll just help me study for this test, I will never, ever, ever wait this late again. No. Right? God, if you'll just save this person that I love, I'll attend church for the rest of my life, every week. No. But is that not the same thing? Is that not a guilt offering? Out of our guilt for something that has gone wrong, we recognize that maybe we've not been walking with the Lord, and so there's a natural bent to want to offer God a guilt offering. But their guilt offering is just as wrong as ours is. Yes, there is a guilt offering that needs to be paid. But their guilt, like our guilt, gave them no clarity. It's the second little blank there underneath that 1 Samuel 6, 4 through 6 point. The first, they recognized the need for a guilt offering. And then they gave their guilt gave them no clarity. Just because you feel guilty about something doesn't mean you're right. Just because I don't know. I always go back to illustrations with kids involved because I'm just living in that world so often. So just, tune me out if you need to. But this goes for having children or just working around kids or being around kids. If a kid does something and breaks something wrong, right, and they feel guilty about it, they bring you what they treasure. They bring you what they treasure. So if they break your favorite cup, they bring you their favorite doll. Or, if they have $1 they got from the tooth fairy and they mess up something of yours, they give you that thing they treasure. Not because it's of equal value and they understand it, but because in their childlike understanding, they don't understand what they're giving. And that cuts two ways. On the one side, if it's offered because we feel bad and it's an inappropriate offering to God, it doesn't please him. But on the other side of that, the other way that cuts is that God doesn't need our heart any more than I need my kid's tooth fairy dollar. But it's the heart and going to him that matters. So did they go to God with a humble heart ready to follow and serve him? No, they just wanted to get out from under affliction. They didn't care. They weren't making an offering to follow God. So they were still actively, willfully running and pushing up against God. All right, but the Philistines determined they're done, right? They're out. They're going to return this thing. And I just love the ridiculousness of these stories sometimes. Why do you think we get so much specificity about how they return the ark? Does it really matter? Okay, why does it matter? Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. And you jumped to the end of the right answer that I'm getting to. But I think there's something even before that. Does God tell them to do that? And we get examples where God tells people to do very specific things to see that he's involved, right? Like when Gideon goes to God, God tells Gideon how to lay out the fleece or do this, that, or the other, right? Or when Elijah's going to go and make sacrifices, God tells him to wet the thing, and he tells him how to set the sacrifice up. We get instructions for God to step in and do God-sized things. But the Philistines determine how and why to appease the Lord without consulting the Lord. They never consult God for how to please them. They are taking a pagan thing. This would have tied in with some of their pagan ritual, right? Cows and the place of honor they had there and some of the idols that they had and the worship they had. This is a very pagan thing to do. They made golden tumors and rats and stuck them with them. This is not what God's asked for. But God is going to use the wicked things of the world in order to show his hand actively there. So it says, you get to the last third of that I think is the right answer. But I think the reason why he gives the Israelites this is, what did the Israelites not do up to this point? Over and over and over and over again. What did Hophni and Phinehas not do? They didn't listen to God. They didn't acknowledge him. They didn't do anything they were supposed to do. And were they doing some of the right physical things? Well, sure. Did they show up to the temple? Absolutely. Did they have their annual sacrifices? Sure. They did to the letter of the law the right thing, but their heart was wrong. And God is using these milking cows and a cart to prove how little, again, he needs man. Remember, is this cart manned or unmanned as it goes back to the Israelites? So now we've got two instances of examples in this text where God has directed the message without the first bit of people help. Twice. You think he's trying to get a message across? God does not need these faithless people. So the Philistines must not repeat the mistakes of the Egyptians, right? They realize we can't do this, we can't do what the Egyptians did. So the Philistines practice pagan religion, which is this idea of like making gold the tumors and making gold the rats. They practice pagan religion, and God leverages it for his glory. Here's from a commentary on this text, same commentary I talked about last week, 2 weeks ago. The cart might have been compared with what was the wagon of Dagon. I've got this quote there for you, because last time I took the quote out, I believe Casey called me out for taking the quote out. I didn't have the quote in there, and you tried to get my quote. So I left the quote in for you. That's right, that from the commentary. So the cart might be compared with the wagon of Dagon, used in the procession during the Zukru festival of ancient Emar. The cart for this Philistine ritual, however, has to be new, that is previously unused and ritually clean, and the milk cows that have never been yoked, would go wherever they pleased since they had not been trained. And as R.P. Gordon notes, it confirms the absence of human interference in their movements. So this is a pagan ritual with these cows that have never been yoked. They've never been trained to follow on a wagon, any of these things. This was like they're casting bones or dice or something might be. They're casting die out there, and God is guiding those things. Last thing about this part here, last two things. Number one, the people of Beth Shemesh received the ark. All right, so these are God's people. These are Israelites now. This is in Beth, it's Beth Shemesh, it's house of Shemesh. They're receiving these, and the Philistines follow the ark back because they want to make sure it gets out of their territory. And sure enough, and Christy said a minute ago, what they would do is they took cows that were weaning mothers, right? So they needed calves, and they put the calves back in the stalls. Do you think that these cows are bent on their own to go to those calves that are whining? You ever heard a calf whine for milk? It's not pretty. It's loud, and it's sad. And still, as soon as they let them go, the cows walked back towards Beth Shemesh. Look at verse 10. The men did so and took 2 milk cows and yoked them to the cart and shut them up their calves at home. And they put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the golden mice and the images of their tumors. And the cows went straight to the direction of Beth Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. Now the people of Beth Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvests in the valley, and when they lifted up their eyes and saw the ark, they rejoiced to see it. The cart came into the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh and stopped there, and a great stone was there. And they split up the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which the golden figures, and set them on a great stone. And the men of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrifices to the Lord on the day of the Lord. And when the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned that day to Ekron. So the people of Beth Shemesh take the ark and offer burnt offerings to the Lord. And then we get this last little part here. These are the golden tumors that the Philistines returned as a guilt offering before the Lord. 1 for Ashdod, 1 for Gaza, 1 for Ashkelon, 1 for Gath, and 1 for Ekron. And the golden mice, according to the numbers of all the cities of the Philistines that belong to the 5 lords, both fortified cities and unwalled. The great stone beside which they set down the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh. So we have this beautiful summary about how God cuts down the wicked people there. But the story doesn't stop there. It'd be great if it did. And it'd be great if like the next line was, and Israel learned its lesson and never again ran away from the Lord. Wouldn't that be great? But is that what happens? No, it's not. Look at chapter 6, verses 18. The last part of verse 18 we read. We'll pick up in verse 19. And he struck some of the men in Beth Shemesh because they looked upon the ark of the Lord. He struck down 70 men of them, and the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great blow. The men of Beth Shemesh said, "Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? And to whom shall he go up away from us?" So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you." And the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord and brought it to the house of Abinadab on the hill. And they consecrated his son Eleazar to have charge over the ark of the Lord. From that day that the ark was lodged at Kiriath Jearim, a long time passed, some 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. All right, so God deals strictly with these active violators of his holiness, right? But God also, this blank here, God deals strictly with passive violators of his holiness. Because there's no passivity with God. Either we are his or we are not. There's not an in-between place. And that's the great lie the devil tells us. Just get out of the firing line of God's anger and you'll be fine. The problem is it obliterates to the uttermost. There is no escaping the holiness of God. It is everywhere at all times at once, and we can't escape it. So why does God still strictly? Well, the people of Beth Shemesh passively violate the holiness of God by refusing to show him reverence, and they die for it. So the people of Beth Shemesh passively violate the holiness of God by refusing to show him the reverence and die for it. The Philistines, we get. They stole the ark. They blatantly in front of God's face put it in front of this false god. But the people of Beth Shemesh, they celebrate. They make sacrifices before the Lord. They do all the right things. And what happens as a result? One little slip up and they die. All right, so I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think the Philistines looked inside that ark? What are the chances? We don't know. Scripture doesn't say. Henry, what do you think? To the covenant people, they did. But the men and the Philistines clearly picked it up and set it before the Lord, and they did not die, set it before Dagog, and they did not die. It just says they picked it up and set it. They didn't have the poles, right? They didn't have any of the things they were supposed to have. They took it up and they put it in a wooden box and they put it on a cart. They didn't obey any of the holy things that God had called them to do. So then, well, we don't have confirmation that men who even touched the ark were diseased. All men, sometimes in some places, yeah. Do you think maybe that God holds people who know better more accountable sometimes? Is there scripture that backs that up? There is, isn't there? There's qualifications for the Levites to not drink and get drunk, and to not take any strong drink at all. They can have no strong drink and no wine. Why? Because they are the people leading God's people, and they have to be clear-headed and clear-minded. What about in the New Testament, where Jesus says, better a millstone be tied around the neck of someone who leads someone else astray? There's a different level of accountability in that as well, right? So there are different, God holds people to a different standard. Now, they're all held to the standard of Jesus at the end of the day. But especially in the Old Testament, he held them to a different standard. Henry, what was your question? Why doesn't God teach them? Because they didn't want to listen. They should. They should. It's a little bit like my dog that won't quit chewing up my cord outside of my house connected to my grill. Every time I scold her firmly, she still continues to do it. He still continues to do it because he doesn't know better, because he's just a dog. And for them, they didn't know God. Even though they were people that were made in the image of God, it did not get through to their head. Their hearts were hardened. Yes, follow up. My dogs have not been bothered by being shocked by the cord. And I don't think they're bothered either. What's that? Hot sauce, maybe that'll work. But, the Israelites, this goes for the Israelites too, right? Shouldn't they have learned time after time that when they're disciplined for running away from God? What about us? Have you ever been guilty of the same sin twice? I have. Multiple times. Because we don't learn the first time. God doesn't get our attention always the first time. And in this case, God really does hold the Philistines to a different level of accountability. They don't know better. The Israelites do 99% of the things right. They hold sacrifices, they sacrifice bulls, they do these things, but they looked into the ark. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm doing some research leading up to this. Here's what's different about what they do when they look at it. They gaze longingly into it, wanting to see something very different than what the Philistines saw. You remember, again, we're reading through Leviticus right now, and there's some weird, crazy stuff in there about, they have to cover the furniture of the tabernacle so that someone doesn't see it who's not supposed to see it, lest they die. Lest they die. What about the Babylonians? The Babylonians come later, and they tear down the temple, and they go and they pull everything out of the Holy of Holies. God doesn't strike down every Babylonian before they can take it, right? It's all taken. The temple's burned to the ground. God holds those who claim to be his people, who know better, who have been given a clear expectation. He holds them to a different level of accountability than he does those who don't know him. But we do the same thing, don't we? Do you hold your kids to a different level of accountability than you do someone else's kids? How about your employees, someone that works in your department? Do you go, look, they don't work in my department. Our team doesn't work that way, don't we? Or we do. We hold people to different levels of accountability. And God is holding them, his holy, righteous people, to a different level of accountability. So how must we be sure not to fall into the trap of spiritual apathy as Israel has before when Hophni and Phinehas were doing this, and currently actively, even after the Ark of the Covenant has been taken, they still, what? Don't do what they're supposed to do. That's right. They've been told it's holy, though. Maybe they just didn't believe it. But it's this, and he struck down some of the men of Bethshemesh because they looked upon the ark of the Lord. That term that's used there, looked upon, is not like they kind of gazed at it or they just looked in it. It's that they felt they had the right and authority to gaze upon the holiness of God. Do you remember the episode where Moses asks to see God? He asks to see God, right? And why does God tell him, no, you can't see me? Because you will surely die. He says, I want to look upon you. That's the word that's used there. It's the same phrase. They're wanting to gaze upon the holiness of God. The intent of their heart is they know how holy God is, and they don't care. The Philistines, did they know how holy God was? Did they know the command not to gaze upon the Lord? And God does not hold them accountable for that in that instance. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, they are held to account, right? God exercises his righteousness and his wrath to the uttermost. But here, we have to be careful that we don't puff ourselves up to think, well, at least I'm not the Philistines. Because God does hold us to account. There is no gradating levels of I'm better than them because they're better than them, where we compare ourselves to. That's poison for the heart. God will hold us to account as a result of that. Another quote here from the commentator is also Jonathan Edwards says, our culture does not help us to smash our graven images of the casual God. Our culture proclaims that God must be the essence of tolerance. He is clumsy rather than holy, the man upstairs rather than my father for Jesus' sake. So long as our novelty license plates declare that God is my co-pilot, we can be sure that we have not yet seen the King, Yahweh of hosts. As Jonathan Edwards noted, it is the absence of godly fear that signifies a lack of the knowledge of God. These men had a lack of godly fear, a lack of fear of God. You know, Proverbs says the fear of God is the beginning of all what? Wisdom. They lacked that because they lacked a fear of God. Now, they were afraid by the end of the day. They were very afraid. The Philistines wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't even want to put somebody on the seat to drive the wagon to take that thing out of there. So what's the difference then between intimacy and familiarity in our dealings with God? Because that's ultimately what it gets down to at the end of the day. The Philistines were familiar with God, but the Israelites were intimate with God. What's the difference between them? Relationship versus not having a relationship. That's exactly right, Jenna. One of them is a relationship. One of them is an acquaintance. And we don't confuse the two. And there is a greater level of responsibility for accountability in a relationship than in an acquaintance. That's why we treat church membership so importantly here. Because church membership matters. When we enter into church membership with each other, we're saying, I know what I want my life to look like. And the best chance I have of that succeeding is having you all in my life to hold me accountable. To know that I do this life with you in a very, very tough way. So that you see me and I see you and we speak hard truth into one another's lives. And we all fall short on that end. We don't hold up our end of the accountability bargain, and when we don't hold up our end on it, we let our brothers and our sisters down. We need to own up to that, and we need to apologize for that when the time comes. But we don't want just a familiarity with God. We want an intimacy with God. I want an intimacy with God. The last thing we see here then is that from then on, the people of Beth Shemesh ensured that the ark was taken somewhere else and stored it safely for 20 years. Here's what they learned: nothing. That ark could have been taken to who? Who was sitting in the temple, taking care of the light and the lantern? Samuel. I was about to say the name of the book. Samuel. Samuel could have taken the ark, but they took it and they hid it because they were afraid and ashamed. And what happened to all of Israel? They lamented. They were sad. They were broken. The ark disappeared for 20 years before it came back. So what do we learn tonight? That there is a problem with indifference. There's a problem with indifference if we are only familiar with God, but there's a major problem with indifference towards a holy God if we have a relationship with Him. We have an intimate relationship with Him. And the challenge for me would be, what are you doing in your life so that your intimate relationship with God is not treated with indifference, so that you don't fall into that trap of, well, God got us the ark back. He took care of Himself. I've just got to be here. No, God will take care of Himself, but He calls us as His graven image that He made, right? He graven His image on us. He made us in the image of God, male and female. He puts the onus on us to be His representatives, on us to be intimately involved with Him. He does not force our face and eyes to the pages of Scripture. That's on us. And the Holy Spirit will compel us and draw us. But at the end of the day, I've got to be the one who wants to do that. And an indifference towards God is poison for that happening in our soul. All right, what questions do you guys have about 1 Samuel 5, 6, and just the beginning of 7? The story with the cows, that's like one of the crazier things, right? I'm not just making that up. Like, what a wild thing to do. I think it's wild. All right, that means I've answered everything and there's no confusion at all. I'd be like Matt from the cake auction on Sunday. Going once, going twice. Henry, is that a question or is that like a half stretch? Because they're puppies and they're stupid. He asked why the dogs don't mind getting shocked. I mean, really, like it's a big dog. He weighs 60 some odd pounds probably at this point, and got a bunch of fur. So I don't know. Maybe it just deadens the shock. I've started unplugging all my stuff at night and bringing it inside. So there's that. Other questions? All right, let's go, Lord, in prayer. Father, thank you for the chance to study your word tonight, to look at the book of 1 Samuel, to see, God, your ark return because you wanted it to happen and you made it so without the help of people. And remember that you do return people to you and you do return your holiness and your righteousness on the earth ultimately through your Son without our help. In fact, God, we're the ones that killed him. God, thank you for drawing us into you when we walk in sin. Call us to repentance and new life. In your name, amen. You are dismissed.